Found out my mom and sister lied to steal my inheritance to fund my sister's house, so I exposed them at her party. Now my mom has disowned me and my sister is playing the victim. I, 15F, need to share what's been happening in my family because the events of last night have left me completely shaken, and I honestly don't know if I did the right thing. The situation with my sister Emma, 24F, has finally reached a breaking point, and I feel like I've lost my entire family in one night. But to understand how things got this bad, I need to start from the beginning. I was never supposed to exist, at least that's the impression I've always gotten from my mother. Emma was their miracle baby, conceived after years of fertility treatments and multiple miscarriages. My parents had almost given up hope when my mom finally got pregnant with Emma. She had the perfect pregnancy, and Emma was born healthy and beautiful. My mom loved to tell the story of how she cried for hours when she first held Emma, knowing their family was finally complete. Except 9 years later, surprise, I came along. My mom has never tried to hide how unexpected and unwanted my arrival was. She tells anyone who will listen about how shocked they were, how they had to scramble to convert the home office into a nursery, how all their plans had to change. She laughs when she tells these stories, but there's always this edge to her voice, like she's still bitter about the inconvenience of it all. My earliest memories are of trying to get my mother's attention while she fawned over Emma. My dad was different. He would always try to make things more equal, but it was like fighting against a tidal wave. He'd take me for ice cream after school sometimes, just the two of us, and tell me how proud he was of me. He'd help me with my homework, attend every school event, and always made sure to celebrate my achievements, even if mom didn't care. But 3 years ago, everything fell apart when he died in a car accident. It was raining heavily that night, the kind of rain that makes it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Dad was driving home from work when a drunk driver ran a red light and crashed into his car. He died instantly, they told us. I remember sitting in the hospital waiting room, hoping it was all a mistake, that he'd walk through those doors with his warm smile and terrible dad jokes. But he never did. The funeral was the first time I saw just how different my mother's love for her two daughters was. Emma was allowed to completely fall apart, sobbing dramatically and needing to be supported by everyone. Mom spent the entire time comforting her, making sure she ate, holding her hand. Meanwhile, I sat alone in the corner, trying to hold myself together because I knew no one would comfort me if I broke down. That's when things really started to get worse at home. With Dad gone, there was no one to balance out Mom's favoritism anymore. Emma moved back home after graduating college, claiming she needed time to find herself while grieving Dad. That's when our house turned into a complete nightmare for me. Every morning, I'd wake up to find a list of chores taped to my door. Laundry, dishes, vacuuming, cleaning the bathrooms, it was endless. If I didn't finish everything before Mom got home from work, there would be hell to pay. Meanwhile, Emma would sleep until noon, spend hours getting ready, then go to her cushy office job where she basically just answered emails all day. When she got home, she'd collapse on the couch, complaining about how exhausted she was while I scrubbed floors or made dinner. I remember one particularly bad weekend about 6 months after Dad died. I had a huge science fair project due on Monday, the kind that could actually affect my final grade. I'd been working on it for weeks, and I just needed Saturday to finish up the display board and practice my presentation. But Friday night, Emma announced she was hosting a dinner party for her work friends the next day. Mom immediately volunteered me to clean the entire house and help prepare the food. When I tried to explain about my project, Mom exploded. She started screaming how I was just looking for excuses to be lazy. She ended up throwing my project materials in the trash, saying I needed to get my priorities straight. I spent all Saturday cleaning and cooking, then stayed up until 4 a.m. trying to redo my entire project. I ended up getting a C because I was too exhausted to present it properly. That incident led to one of our worst fights ever. I was so angry about my grade that I finally snapped. I screamed at Mom about how she was ruining my chances at a good future. Emma jumped in, calling me dramatic and ungrateful. She started listing off all the ways I was a burden to the family. The fight turned physical when Emma grabbed my phone and threatened to throw it against the wall if I didn't shut up and show some respect. I tried to grab it back, and we ended up in a full-on brawl, shoving each other and pulling hair. Mom had to physically separate us, but of course, I was the only one who got punished. I was grounded for a month, lost my phone privileges, and had to write Emma an apology letter. That was also around the time I started noticing money going missing from my piggy bank. I'd been saving up birthday money and allowance for years, dreaming of buying a laptop for school. One day, I noticed the stack of bills seemed smaller than I remembered. When I counted, over $200 was missing. I confronted Emma about it, since she was the only one who had been in my room recently, supposedly to borrow a sweater. She denied everything, of course, and Mom took her side. They both gaslit me, saying I must have miscounted or spent the money and forgotten about it. But then I found receipts from the mall in Emma's purse, receipts for exactly the amount that was missing from my savings. When I showed them to Mom, she just shrugged and said Emma probably needed the money more than I did, since she had real expenses to worry about. The hits just kept coming after that. Emma would borrow my clothes without asking, then return them stained or stretched out. She'd eat the special snacks I bought with my babysitting money, leaving the empty wrappers in my room like she was taunting me. She'd invite her friends over and they'd take over the entire house, leaving me to clean up their mess while they went out partying. The worst part was how she would sweet-talk Mom into getting her way. She'd put on this sad, vulnerable act, talking about how hard it was to build her career while grieving Dad. Mom would melt, giving her whatever she wanted: money, time off from responsibilities, expensive gifts. Meanwhile, I couldn't even ask for new school supplies without being lectured about how expensive I was to raise. Things got marginally better when Emma finally moved out a year ago. She'd saved up enough money, mostly because she never had to pay for anything while living with us, and found a small apartment across town. I was so relieved to have some peace in the house, even though Mom still compared everything I did to Emma. Emma would visit Mom several times a week, and I learned to make myself scarce during those visits. I'd hide in my room or the backyard, anywhere to avoid their toxic dynamic. They'd sit in the living room for hours, talking and laughing, while I tried to ignore how much it hurt to be so obviously excluded from their little club. That's when my grandmother, my mom's mother, became my real lifeline. She was nothing like Mom. She actually listened when I talked, remembered the things I was interested in, and never compared me to Emma. I'd spend weekends at her house sometimes, helping her in her garden or baking cookies in her kitchen. She taught me about different flowers and plants, sharing stories about her own childhood while we worked. She had this beautiful diamond ring that had been in the family for generations. Sometimes, when I was helping her clean her jewelry collection, she'd let me try it on. She'd tell me stories about how her grandmother had worn it during the war, hiding it in a loaf of bread when they had to flee their home. How her mother had pawned it to pay for medical treatment for her brother, then spent years working to buy it back. The ring wasn't just beautiful, it was a piece of our family's history. When Grandma passed away a year ago, it hit me harder than anything since losing Dad. She was the only person left who made me feel truly loved and valued. The morning of her funeral, I overheard Emma and Mom discussing how they would split up her jewelry collection before the will was even read. They were so sure everything would go to them. After all, Emma was the perfect granddaughter, and Mom was the only child. Imagine their shock when the lawyer read out that while most of Grandma's assets would go to Mom, her jewelry collection was to be split specifically, some special pieces to Emma, and the diamond ring, that precious family heirloom, to me. Mom actually gasped out loud, and Emma's face turned red with anger. I could hardly believe it myself, but it made sense. Grandma had seen how I was treated. She knew this ring would mean more to me than just its monetary value. Mom tried everything to get me to hand over the ring for safekeeping. She said I was too young to be responsible for such an important piece of family history. She tried guilt trips, saying Grandma would have wanted the ring to be properly preserved. When that didn't work, she started making threats about how easily jewelry could get lost or damaged if I wasn't careful. Then, 2 weeks ago, Mom came to me with what she claimed was an emergency. According to her, Emma had badly sprained her ankle at work and needed a private nurse to help her at home. She said Emma's insurance wouldn't cover it, and she couldn't help because she was saving up for a new car. That's when she dropped the bomb. She wanted me to sell Grandma's ring to help pay for Emma's care. I refused immediately. Emma had a good job, and even if her insurance didn't cover home care, surely she could figure something out. Besides, this was my inheritance. But Mom wouldn't let it go. She started with guilt trips, talking about how family should help each other in times of need. She brought up how I never visited Emma, conveniently forgetting that Emma had never once invited me over. When emotional manipulation didn't work, she got nasty. She started bringing up every little thing I'd ever done wrong, every mistake I'd ever made. She said I was selfish and ungrateful, just like she'd always known I would be. She said Grandma would be ashamed of how I was behaving, using her memory to manipulate me even further. Finally, she pulled out her nuclear option. She threatened to cancel my upcoming trip to visit my dad's parents. She knew how much that trip meant to me. My paternal grandparents were the only family members besides Grandma who had ever treated me with real love and respect. I only got to see them a few times a year because they lived in a different state, and this trip was supposed to be for 2 whole weeks during summer break. After days of constant pressure, threats, and manipulation, I finally broke down and gave her the ring. I felt like I was betraying Grandma's memory, but I couldn't risk losing my trip to see my other grandparents. Mom took the ring to a jeweler that very day, not even giving me a chance to change my mind. I spent the next week avoiding Mom as much as possible, feeling sick every time I thought about the ring. Then, last night, everything changed. I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw a post from Emma. It was an invitation to a housewarming party, complete with pictures of a beautiful new house she had just bought. She was bragging about being a homeowner at 24, calling it her biggest achievement and thanking everyone who had helped make her dream come true. My heart stopped when I saw the house. It was in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in our city, the kind of place where even small houses cost a fortune. There was no way Emma could have afforded it on her salary. And what about her supposedly sprained ankle? The party was scheduled for this weekend, How was she planning to host dozens of people if she was injured badly enough to need a private nurse? I was about to take screenshots when the post suddenly disappeared. Emma had deleted it, but not before I'd memorized the address and date. It was obvious what had happened. Mom had probably warned Emma that I might see the post and figure out where my ring money had really gone. The fact that they tried to hide it only confirmed my suspicions. Last night, Mom told me she was going to a work party and left the house all dressed up. I waited a few minutes, then called an Uber to take me to the address from Emma's deleted post. Sure enough, Mom's car was parked outside the house, which was lit up like a Christmas tree and full of people. Everyone I knew was there, including family members, friends, even some of my cousins who had claimed they were too busy to come to my last birthday party. They all froze when they saw me walk in. Later, I found out through my aunt that Emma and Mom had told everyone not to mention the house to me because I was having trouble in school and couldn't handle Emma's success. They had made me out to be some kind of problem child who needed to be kept in the dark. One of Emma's friends was holding a karaoke microphone. They were in the middle of some party game. Without hesitation, I walked over, took the mic, and started speaking. I told everyone exactly what had happened, how Mom had forced me to sell Grandma's ring under false pretenses while they had lied about Emma needing medical care. I explained how Emma was now pretending to have bought this house all on her own when it was partially funded by my stolen inheritance. I didn't stick around to hear their excuses or see the fallout. I said my piece and left, taking another Uber back home. Mom came home about 30 minutes after I did, absolutely livid. She started screaming the moment she walked in, saying I had ruined Emma's special day out of jealousy and spite. She said I had no right to humiliate them in front of everyone, that if I had issues with her decisions, I should have talked to her privately. That's when she dropped another bomb. Apparently, Emma hadn't even known where the money for her down payment came from until recently. Mom claimed she only told Emma about the ring when she made her take down the Facebook post, wanting to prevent me from finding out. She said I had no reason to humiliate Emma since she wasn't even aware of what had happened. But I don't buy that for a second. Even if Emma truly didn't know about the ring, which I doubt, she still accepted money that she knew must have come from somewhere. She was still willing to lie about having a sprained ankle. Mom says I've ruined everything, that most of the party guests left early and Emma was devastated. Apparently, she broke down crying after everyone left, saying I had ruined what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life. Mom hasn't spoken to me since our argument last night, leaving for work early this morning before I woke up. Now that I've had some time to calm down, I'm starting to wonder if I went too far. Maybe I should have confronted them privately instead of exposing everything at the party. But then I think about how they lied to me, and tried to hide everything, and I feel justified in what I did. They were never going to admit what they'd done unless I forced them to face it publicly. Still, I can't help but worry about what comes next. I'm only 15, I still have to live here with Mom for at least 3 more years. After what I did tonight, I can't imagine things will ever go back to even the pretense of normal. But maybe that's for the best. At least now everything is out in the open, and I don't have to pretend anymore either. So here I am, wondering if I'm the asshole for taking my revenge in such a public way. I know I've probably destroyed any chance of having a relationship with Emma, and things with Mom are worse than ever. Update 1. It's been exactly 3 days since the housewarming party incident, and the situation at home has become almost unbearable. I feel like I need to document everything that's happened since that night, if only to convince myself I'm not going crazy with how they're trying to spin this situation. Mom didn't come home the night after my last post. She stayed at Emma's new house, the one my ring helped pay for, and didn't return until late the next evening. When she finally came back, she walked straight past me like I was invisible, even though I was sitting right there in the living room doing my homework. I could smell wine on her as she walked by, and she was carrying a small overnight bag. She went straight to her room and slammed the door so hard the family photos on the wall rattled. One of them actually fell and shattered. Mom didn't even come out to clean it up. I left the broken glass there overnight, curious to see what would happen. Sure enough, the next morning, Mom came downstairs, saw the mess, and immediately started screaming about how I was being passive-aggressive by not cleaning up my mess. When I pointed out that she was the one who slammed the door and caused the picture to fall, she got this scary cold look in her eyes and said, "No, you caused this. You cause everything bad that happens in this family." That same morning, I started receiving a barrage of messages from relatives. Most of them were obviously coordinated. They all had the same basic message about how disappointed they were in my behavior, how I needed to apologize to Emma, how I was tearing the family apart with my jealousy. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Instead, I took screenshots of everything and saved them in a folder on my phone. Something tells me I might need proof of their behavior someday. The silence at home has become suffocating. Mom has stopped cooking altogether, not that she cooked much for me anyway, but now there's not even any food in the fridge. When I asked her for grocery money yesterday, she laughed and said maybe I should sell something else if I wanted to eat. I've been surviving on the snacks I had hidden in my room and what little allowance I had saved up. This morning, I walked to the corner store and bought some bread and peanut butter. At least I won't starve. Emma hasn't tried to contact me directly, but she's been posting passive-aggressive things on social media. She's changed her profile picture to one of her and mom together, captioned with some quote about how blood doesn't always mean family and sometimes you have to cut out toxic people. The irony would be funny if it didn't hurt so much. Last night, I overheard mom on the phone with someone talking about taking legal action against me for defamation. They were discussing how I had maliciously spread lies about the house purchase and deliberately tried to destroy Emma's reputation. Mom was saying she would support Emma if she wanted to press charges. I'm only 15, can they even sue me? I started researching defamation laws online, but everything I found was confusing and scary. This morning, I tried one last time to talk to mom. I knocked on her door before she left for work and asked if we could please sit down and discuss everything calmly. She opened the door, looked right through me, and said, "I have nothing to say to ungrateful liars." Then she walked past me, got in her car, and drove away. I watched her car disappear down the street and realized this might be the end of any real relationship with my mother. I've started gathering important documents and scanning copies to save online. I've also been recording every interaction with mom, keeping a detailed log of what she says and does. Something tells me I might need all of this documented, especially if they're serious about taking legal action. For now, I'm just trying to focus on school and staying out of mom's way as much as possible. I spend most of my time in my room with the door locked. I don't trust her not to go through my things anymore. I've also started researching what options I might have if things get worse. I know my dad's parents would take me in a heartbeat, but they live 3 states away and I'm not sure about the legal implications of moving while I'm still a minor. I'm trying to stay strong, but I'm scared about what happens next. Mom's threat about legal action keeps playing in my head. What if they really do try to sue me? What if they try to prevent me from seeing my paternal grandparents? What if mom kicks me out? I know she legally can't, but she's proven she doesn't care much about what's legal or right when it comes to me. At least I finally stood up for myself. I just hope the cost of doing so doesn't end up being more than I can handle. Update 2. I guess it was inevitable that my dad's parents would find out about everything eventually, but I wasn't prepared for how quickly things would escalate once they did. It's been exactly 1 week since my last update, and the situation has completely transformed. It started with a phone call to my paternal grandparents. I usually try to keep our conversations light, not wanting to worry them with my problems. But this time, as soon as Grandma asked how I was doing, I just broke down. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The words came pouring out through my tears. The absolute silence on the other end of the line after I finished talking was terrifying. Then I heard Grandpa in the background asking what was wrong, and Grandma's muffled voice explaining everything to him. There was some whispered discussion I couldn't quite make out, and then Grandma came back to the phone with a completely different tone. She started asking very specific questions like, was I eating properly? Did I feel safe in the house? Had mom ever hit me? Then she wanted exact dates and details about when everything had happened with the ring. When I explained about mom not buying groceries and making comments about me needing to sell something else if I wanted to eat, Grandma made this sound that actually scared me a little. After about an hour of them gathering information, Grandma told me they would be on the first flight out tomorrow morning. I tried to tell them that wasn't necessary, that I could handle things, but Grandpa took the phone and said words I'll never forget. We failed to protect you once when we let your mother pull away after your father died. We won't fail you again. True to their word, they flew in early the next morning. I was in my room when I heard a car pull up. They'd taken an Uber from the airport. Mom was at work, so I let them in. Grandma took one look at me and burst into tears, pulling me into this hug that made me feel safer than I had in years. Grandpa started walking through the house, taking pictures of everything with his phone. They insisted on taking me out for a proper meal right away. Over breakfast, they said that they'd already contacted their lawyer back home, and he'd put them in touch with a family law attorney in our city. They wanted me to come live with them, permanently. I tried to explain about school and my friends here, but Grandma just took my hand and asked if any of that was worth staying in a house where I wasn't even being fed. We were just finishing up when Mom called. She was screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Apparently, one of the neighbors had seen my grandparents arrive and called her at work. She was on her way home and demanding to know what they were doing there. I could barely get a word in before she hung up. When we got back to the house, Mom's car was already in the driveway. She was standing in the front doorway with her arms crossed, trying to look intimidating. Emma's car was there too. She must have called her for backup. What followed was probably the most intense confrontation I've ever witnessed. As soon as we walked in, Mom started her usual performance about how difficult and ungrateful I was, how I was tearing the family apart with my lies. But Grandma shut her down immediately. She pulled out a full manila folder of printed screenshots, everything I'd sent them over the years about how I was being treated, plus social media posts and messages from relatives that proved the ring story. Then Grandpa spoke up. He talked about how Dad would be ashamed of how they treated me. Emma tried to interrupt, starting her usual crying routine, but Grandpa just talked over her. He said they'd already documented everything and were prepared to go to court if necessary, both for custody of me and to recover the value of the ring through civil action. That's when Mom changed tactics, going from aggressive to tearfully defensive. She started making excuses about how hard it had been as a single mother, how she'd done her best, how I was exaggerating everything. But Grandma wasn't having it. Emma then burst into tears and ran out of the house. Mom followed her, but not before turning back to scream that I was dead to her and she never wanted to see me again. Grandma just calmly replied that would make the custody transfer much easier. Now I'm sitting in a hotel room with my grandparents while their lawyer handles all the paperwork. They've already enrolled me in school near their home for next semester. Mom hasn't tried to contact me since she left, but Emma has been posting nonstop on social media about toxic family members and choosing your own family. I'm still processing everything that's happened in the past couple of days. The lawyer says the custody transfer should be straightforward since Mom has essentially abandoned me and there's clear evidence of neglect. They're also pursuing legal action about the ring, arguing that Mom and Emma committed fraud by lying about the medical emergency to coerce me into selling my inheritance. I know the road ahead won't be easy. I'm leaving behind everything I've known, starting over in a new city, new school, new life. But for the first time since Dad and my grandmother from my mom's side died, I feel like I have people in my corner who genuinely want what's best for me.